Well, concerns around the economy isn't just going to go away. Politics, all know politics because they are the issues that touch Nigerians directly. Efforts that need to be made to stabilize Nigeria's economy going forward are still on the front burner. But let's begin the conversation here with Dr. Muda Yusuf, who is founder and chief executive officer, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, CPPE. He's also a past DG, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Yusuf, let me begin with this question. There's a 2016 report done by the CBN, and was talking about the persistent causes of inflation in Nigeria. And they looked at about 30 or 40 years or so, and the conclusion was that the headline inflation in Nigeria has constantly hovered around double-digit figures for 30 out of the 40 observation years between 1973 and 2013. So is there any surprise that we are having the issues we are having now, since we haven't dealt with that for more than 40 years?
No, when you say double digits, 10 is double digits.
Yeah.
We are talking of 22% now, So these are some of the major differences. There are double digits and there are double digits. Even 99 is double digits.
Yes, I agree, but the point...
So the point is that the inflation situation has been getting worse, at least in the past 5 years or so, significantly worse. And it's not just in Nigeria, even globally, it's a concern. If you listen to reviews of economists in Europe, in the US, sometimes they talk about inflation peaking at 40-year high, 30-year high. So it's a major issue around the world. Now we are talking about 22%. That is the latest figure we have in Nigeria, 22% inflation, headline inflation, which is also very high. But when you relate this to what people buy, because inflation is actually, if you reduce it to maybe a micro level, it's about the basket of the goods that you consume. If you look at the basket of goods that the average Nigerians consume, you'll be talking about inflation that is even much more than this 22%. Because what this data is telling us is that between now and this time last year, prices have gone up by 22%. Whereas if you go out there and talk to people, that how high has the price of bread gone? Loaf of bread, maybe this time last year was maybe about the big size, maybe about 700 naira. Today it's about 1,000 naira. Well, that's almost a 30% increase.
The question that I'm asking,
yes.
While I understand the issues you're making about the nature of the double digits and all, and you said that it's gotten worse over the past 5 years.
Yes.
That report says it's this high in 17 years. In other words, there are some things we've left undone consistently for all these years, between 40 and 17 years, that has brought us to where we are now. What are these things? And why does it seem intractable?
Quite a number of factors. Some of them are domestic, and some of them are global. If you take the instance of the energy cost, for instance, cost of energy affects practically everything. And even globally, one of the biggest drivers of inflation is energy cost, especially on the back of this Russia-Ukraine crisis. I'm talking of recent inflationary pressure. Look at, for instance, the cost of diesel. Cost of diesel, how much was it, 3-4 years ago? We are talking 300, probably 400, but today we are talking of over 800. And when you talk of diesel, you use diesel for all these big generators that we use, either in offices or in factories and all of that. All these trucks that move critical goods around the country in terms of logistics, they are running on diesel. All these big buses are running on diesel. Then you have issues of things like even the monetary phenomenon. You know, CBN financing of deficits has grown significantly over the last, 8 years or 10 years.
The law?
Of course, against the law.
So who should be tackling
against the law? But let's just talk about the economics of it. The legality of it, is a different matter. But the economics of it is that CBN financing is a major factor, major monetary factor.
But just a second.
Because let me just give you some data. In 2015, credit to government was about 2 trillion naira. Banking system credit to government was about 2 trillion naira. In February 2023, it's 28 trillion naira. You can imagine what that means. And even in economics, we regard this funding of deficits by the central bank in particular, because the bulk of this credit is coming from the central bank. This funding of deficit is regarded as inflation tax. That's to underscore the impact
when you say it's inflation tax,
yes.
Perhaps you want to break it down for us to understand in lay language.
Well, in lay language is that if you want to tax people and you don't want to go around harassing them, imposing taxes on them, just print money. If you want to raise maybe 1 trillion naira, you can't get it from FRS, you can't get it from whatever. The CBN provides it. Because these are finances that are not backed by any output.
And by tax, you mean that the people will still have to bear the brunt of that
printing?
Yes,
because it diminishes your purchasing power. That is why it's called inflation tax. So they tax you without knowing it. Without knowing there's a tax on you. So it's a major phenomenon. Then, of course, you have this exchange rate problem. The exchange rate pass-through on many of our products and services is enormous. And we all know what the exchange rate situation had been. Apart from the depreciation, there's problem of liquidity, access, and all of that. These things have very profound impact on inflation. And the biggest enemy of the poor people is inflation.
Speaking of exchange rates, there seems to have been another exchange rate that has crept into the economy following the Naira redesign policy. The exchange rate over Naira for Naira has not necessarily gone down. But let me bring this to Professor Ken Ife, who joins us from Abuja. Professor Ken Ife, by the way, is a development economist and lead consultant, ECOWAS Commission. Thank you, Professor Ife. If you listen to Dr. Yusuf, he has rightly pointed out that, this is not in isolation. The inflation that Nigeria is experiencing is not in isolation. There is the Russia-Ukraine war, which is also affecting the global economy, which is why I'd like to also talk about the moves by the Western economies to raise interest rate following the experience on global inflation. But when consistently Nigeria's Apex Bank, says that is the only way to go for our own economy, to raise interest rate when inflation goes up. Are we in the same place, as Western economies? Is that a justification, for the decision to, or the only considered solution to check inflation?
No, I don't think so. I don't think the central bank said that. I didn't think the central bank could even say that monetary action should be the way and the only way. I don't think he said that. The thing is this: inflation is price, and in any pricing mechanisms, you have to look at demand and supply side of it. First of all, Nigerian inflation in particular is not a linear solution. It's not a linear regression of two items. It's a much more complex multivariate analysis that you have to do. First of all, you have insecurity sitting there as a cross-cutting factor across all indicators. You see this security sitting there, and it's affecting everything we are going to talk about. Two, when you look at it, there's a lot to be said about the supply side, a lot to be said about the demand side. But let me tell you, Nigerian inflation, you have every conceivable inflation in place. You have imported inflation, which is coming from what happens at the exchange rate and what happens at across Russia and all of that trade war between America and China, you have demand side of it, which is demand pull inflation. There is an element of it in Nigeria, but don't forget, Nigeria is only 200 million people. There are 100 million francophone countries surrounding Nigeria that are exerting more demand pull inflation than Nigerians. Let me tell you why they do that. Our exchange rate 5 years ago, 6 years ago, was 1 naira buying 3 francs CFA. Today, 1 naira cannot even buy 1 franc CFA. So in their eyes, from their perspective, food from Nigeria is very cheap. 60% cheaper. They don't need to go to farm anymore. Buy Nigerian goods, preserve it, sell it back to Nigeria, whatever. They are making money. And when you look at food is cruising at over 24% and is giving 2.5% or more lead over the composite index, and it has remained at that level for over many years, just cruising above CPI. Okay, so now when you contemplate action on the demand side, you have to bear in mind what other things that are outside your control in Nigeria. Then let's come to the supply side. Just take one factor on the supply side. Our failure to produce refined petrol means that all the money we could earn from crude supply is gone away. All the money we would have earned is used to export it, bring in the refined product, and pay a penalty of 500 billion naira every month for subsidy. Now, that 500 million they're taking away from government means government can't spend money. So you can't create jobs. You can't focus, you can't pay for products. And you now have to go away and borrow those monies to be able to do the infrastructure. And look at the impact that is going to have, because you still have to go and look for dollar to service the debt that are denominated in dollar. 60% of world debt is denominated in dollar. And then you come down to that same dollar issue. I've just mentioned one. Now, NNPC used to send $3 billion every month to CBN. 3 billion. But now it's only doing 300 million, which is 10%. And CBN has to find $1.8 billion every month to pay for imports and all of that, and even to service debts. So where's he going to get the money? Do you print money, dollar in Nigeria? So you will have to be real, that you just can't expect what you don't have. If you don't have it, you don't have it. And then you come again on the supply side. You look at, as Muda has just mentioned, the main transport-related issue is the cost of diesel. It's gone up by 400%. That's what manufacturers are using. That's what the big trucks are using. Even the people selling the petrol, their trucks are running on diesel, so they've had enough of it. So they have to push the price up because they can't do it. So you look at the manufacturers. So where is our productivity? If you are going to have to live with higher cost of electricity, your bills have gone up, even water has gone up, everything has gone up, and then 4 times more cost. So the input cost on the supply side is gone completely out of control. So you are looking at imported inflation you have little control over. You are looking at the demand pool inflation. You think you have some, you think you could use monetary policy to control some, but then you have exogenous ones, which is the company. Then you look at the cost push inflation, and that is all the area I've just mentioned, collaborating what Muda has said on cost push. You can't do much if you are looking at productivity. One, you look at
Prof, I really want us to look at
then physical productivity.
I want us to look at a lot of things, but time never is our friend. So for me, I'd like us to take a look at what any government can do right now. I mean, we know that the Buhari administration has been thinking of removing subsidies because they say this is no longer sustainable. But in the meantime, they've secured a loan, $800 million, we're told, to try and give Nigerians palliatives. And there are big questions as to how that is going to be distributed. For some people, they think that that's a waste of money, and that money can be put into refineries to get the refineries into a working state for us to be able to refine what it is that we produce. So for you right now, what do you think is the immediate task, not just for the Buhari administration that is on its way out, but the incoming government? What should they be doing immediately they get in to try and bring some relief? It might not be immediate, some relief to the economic shocks we're currently experiencing.
The quickest relief you can have is to stop the hemorrhage on our resources. You have to stop this 500 billion. And you can stop it just by making sure that the least that is needed to be spent on modular refineries can be done. And look, if you say only $50 billion, you can have 120,000 liters barrel a day refinery. All these 5 major oil marketers that are pushing all our crude out and bringing all that thing, all of them can set up one within 3 to 6 months. If you want to look at backward integration agenda that was done on cement, you don't need rocket. It's not rocket science, because we have history of success in that. Why do you have to wait for NNPC to gulp $1.something billion refining, repairing the dead refineries that have gone past their useful life? Put money, let them go and do this. And it is 6 months, because they are sitting, all these are sitting off the shelf in Texas. That's one. Of course, you have to look at the productivity factor, and that, you know, if you are not acting on the productive side of the balance sheet, then you think you can solve all the problem from the demand side. It's not going to work. We're going to be waiting for a very long time. So how about the service productivity, labor productivity? Because that impacts heavily on service sector. Look at the advice being given. Do a bit more, because the growth is in the service sector. So, and not saying you can't produce food. Food is a basic item. If you don't grab the food, people will die. So but you have to carry the two together to make sure that, because don't forget that the human productivity also influences the other factors of production.
When you talk about hemorrhaging first, I need to be clear on that, because there are different areas that are hemorrhaging in the oil sector. I mean, there was a time when crude oil was being stolen. We understand that, you know, there's an attempt to try and put a stop to that now. How successful it's been is still something that we're watching to see just how much we've been able to ramp up our crude oil production. That's on the one hand. And subsidies, people are saying it is not possible that we're consuming as much. I mean, right now figures are going to about 80 million liters that Nigerians are supposed to be consuming, and, you know, those figures are in heavy dispute. So precisely where are you looking at us stopping this hemorrhaging?
Well, first of all, if you don't have we talk about artisanal refiners, they will continue to survive as long as there is a supply gap. You talk about the waiting for the major facility. If Dangote comes in tomorrow, then these arguments will change, because at least 40% of what they produce will enter into the equation. So it reduces our problem by about 40%, roughly. But these modular are here, and the people, you are not going anywhere. The NNPC should invest 10% or 20% in those, because the private sector are ready to play. But they have to commit. If they don't commit, they will never give them any crude to refine. Then you now see competition between the big things that NNPC is trying to do and the small modular refineries. But I'm saying that rather than wait for that to happen, tell the oil marketers that we are fed up with this whole situation. If you can't show me where your modular refinery is, you're not going to be moving this crude out and then moving this petrol in. They will invest immediately. Because when they invest, they will carry their refined product to their tank farms. From there, it enters national distribution. And then if we have oversupply over a period, they will start using that to export their refined product. So they are part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Okay, let's quickly take a break at this point. We'll be back shortly to continue the discussion. Please stay with us. Well, still keeping an eye on the economy here, and Professor Ken Ife, development economist, lead consultant at the ECOWAS Commission, is right here in our Abuja studios, and Dr. Muda Yusuf, who's the founder and CEO of the Promotion of Private Enterprise, is in our studios in Lagos. Well, just before we go back to Lagos, Prof, I know Nyota has a quick question for you.
Yeah, just a quick one. Prof, when you talk about the petroleum side, the modular refineries, you talk about NNPC investing in them and the marketers also doing the same thing. That will ease that part. Let's look at the agricultural value chain. I mean, when this administration came on board, one of the things that they talked about using to change the state of things is agriculture, and went into rice production. But at the end of the day, we see the cost of food going up, and that is a major problem. But how do we turn around that situation as well?
Well, the agricultural one is actually a very good solution if we can get to the bottom of it. Remember what I said.
Is it that deep?
No. Remember what I said. There are 100 million mouths surrounding Nigeria that are feeding on us because of their agroecology, because of the climate change. The impact of climate change on them is so pervasive that they have to rely on an agricultural production system. And we are the food basket for Africa in Nigeria, especially in the Middle Belt area. They're the food basket for Africa.
So without necessarily...
And then you have no control over that, because under ECOWAS Treaty of free movement of goods, services, capital, and right of establishment, that we are obliged to let everybody come and buy anything that we have.
It simply
and they're not paying you in dollars.
We're not paying it. What it simply means is that we're not producing enough. Because it ought to be an advantage that if we produced enough, we could feed ourselves and feed our brothers. But the moment, the moment the food is not enough, when our brothers come in, it means that they're not able to, what is left is not enough, and then you now have a lot of naira chasing very few goods.
And I can give you one example. We produce 2 years ago, we produced 62 million metric tons of cassava. That is 25% of world production of cassava. We produce 71% of yam, 40 million metric tons of yam. 71% of the whole world production of yam is in Nigeria. But that cassava we produce, 90% is eaten by mouth. So all the people who have invested in bioethanol refineries, the starch processing, and they can't find the raw material. So you have the Indians and Chinese going into the farm, not even in the market in rural area, into the farm to go and buy it in the farm. It tells you how chronic that food shortage is. But of course, there are so many hostages to that fortune, because you need to have more intense mechanization. You need to get the women out to go and grow. Africa Union says 80% of the basic food we are eating are grown by women, and 80% of processing of primary things, garega and all that, are done by women, and 80% of marketing of it in the rural is done by women. How comfortable are these women going out to go and plant or to go and harvest in the wake of the crisis that we have and the insecurity? So you've got all that impacting on our capacity to produce. And then, of course, you have to mechanize. And then we have 350 dams, if not more. How many of them are being used, not only for micro irrigation or even for aquaculture? Nothing, very little. So we have 4 times more water, surface water than South Africa. 4 times more, but we're not producing as much.
Let's take it to Dr. Muda Yusuf. We have a bleak picture painted here, but yet we also have not just a light at the end of the tunnel, but looks like a floodlight at the end of the tunnel. If we can get there, as Professor Ife said, if we can get to the bottom of it, what do you think is the quickest way that any government, the outgoing government possibly, and even the in-government government and the private sector, can go to get to the bottom of that agricultural value chain, to see what we can pull from there? Because you find out that as we speak, we have the arable land, we have the water resources, we have the weather, but it looks as if we're not going anywhere.
Well, I like your optimism when you talk about floodlights at the end of the tunnel, and not just light. Of course, there's a lot that can be done. First of all, our agricultural sector is still being driven by the traditional farmers. It's still being driven by the subsistence agriculture. There is very little technology that we are using in our agriculture. There is very little commercial farming, very little mechanization. So if there is one sector that has suffered serious setback, or that has not been progressing well because of lack of application of technology, it's our agricultural sector. So there's a whole lot that we need to do to ensure mechanization, to ensure the use of technology, to ensure that we get our youths, the younger generation, to go into agriculture. And for that to happen, we need to create a space for the whole system to be driven by technology. And we also need to do a lot across the entire value chain. You talk about value chain. And the value chain starts from the inputs that you provide for agriculture, the seedlings, the machineries, the agrochemicals and all of that. We need to make that a lot more affordable. If there are taxes and levies on all of these things, we need to remove that. Because if you talk to some few big players in agriculture, they will tell you the challenges they face with getting the agric equipment, with getting access to agrochemicals, fertilizers, improved seedlings. They tell you challenges around forex, challenges around the ports and things like that. So those are some big issues. Then, even for those who want to go into big commercial farming, they complain about the issues of land. Yes, I mean, this may surprise you. We have quite a lot of arable land, but access to some of this land can be extremely difficult. And for some of them that are even in operation, they complain a whole lot about issues of insecurity, about issues of community. You know, that makes it difficult for us to have that kind of scale of farming. If you have real big-time, large-scale farmers, we don't even need more than 20% of those who are currently in agriculture.
But the question then, Dr. Yusuf, would be, do you think, from what you and Professor Ike have said, do you think we have a concerted economic developmental trajectory? With all that you both have talked about so far, I mean, you've talked about all the issues that have bedeviled us for many years now. Do you think there is a plan, a concerted effort with an expectation or a goal for economic development, concerted, targeted economic development plan?
You see, in Nigeria, we are not short of plans. If you go to the presidency or go to the Ministry of Planning, the place is full of different kind of plans, quality documents that have been prepared by experts on practically all sectors of the economy, and submissions that have been made by the organized private sector. You know, the OPS, the economy.
So what then?
Fantastic documents.
What then is the problem?
It's about education. It's about the political will. It's about getting the right people to drive the process. So, at the end of the day, it's about governance, the quality of governance. Governance is about putting the right people in the right places. It's about removing all these barriers. It's about removing self-interest. It's about ensuring there's political will. It's about removing corruption. These are the impediments. But the ideas are there.
But you also spoke about the other time, you talked about the economic issues, and then the legality of those issues also comes to play right here now. You spoke about the fact that the other time that the CBN had been doing some things, funding, government, so to speak, illegally. So if we do not address those illegal issues, how then can we be sure that whatever plan we come up with is going to make any sense at the end of the day?
It's still governance. It's the quality of governance. Because the CBN has tried to justify that. Yes, we had COVID, we had economic challenges, we had revenue challenges, but must we go that far? If the Act says that the CBN can fund government to the tune of 5% of actual revenue of the previous year, and that no other advances should be given until the amount that has been given has been liquidated. That is the position of the CBN Act. But we are talking about close to 50% or more. That's a flagrant violation.
And when you talk about poor execution as well, where government is concerned, my mind immediately goes to the Ministry of Agriculture, and wonder what exactly they're not doing well, to execute whatever document that is at their disposal, to shore up a revenue in that regard and help Nigeria to become food sufficient.
In the last few years, the CBN has even practically taken over agriculture from the Ministry of Agriculture at the federal level. Because when you look at all these dramatization around rice pyramid and all of that. You hardly see the agricultural minister there. The minister doesn't feature. So there is also something wrong in the way that some of these, compartments or agencies of government.
So if we're going to make any progress, Dr. Yusuf,
yes.
in 30 seconds, what are the first emergency steps, if I can use the word, that should be taken?
You see, we are talking about inflation. Very quick wins. We need to curb this CBN funding of deficits. It's high-powered money, and it has a very serious impact on inflation. Secondly, we need to quickly reform the foreign exchange markets or foreign exchange policy. We cannot continue to have a foreign exchange system where some people will be getting foreign exchange at 460 or 461, others will be getting it at over 700. That cannot work. That is creating a major issue in Forex. Forex is a major problem that is feeding into inflation. We need to address issues of insecurity.
Absolutely.
Even with all of this, okay, Professor Ife was talking about people coming from all over the West African, so that should be exports. Ideally, that should be a source of foreign exchange for us. But the security situation has seriously affected supply of food. Many of the farmers are now in IDP camps.
All right, let's
some of the things that
take the final words of Professor Ken Ife as well. And Prof, I'd like you to speak to the concerns about, especially as it concerns the small and medium enterprises. What are the quick wins for them? In 30 seconds, if you can.
Look, the thing is, I'm hotly aware of issues around the service side, around the demand side. But I have to tell you that if you want to have traction, you have to focus on the supply side, because that is where, first of all, those are primary. They are primary factors. The demand side are more secondary factors. You have to produce the food. You have to do something about the transportation, otherwise nothing cannot move from A to B. You have to do something about the power, otherwise you won't be able to power your systems. You have to mechanize. So these are primary. So in terms of the challenges we have around food supply, if you want to deal with it in a sustainable way, we have to up our value chain. You have to add value. Because at the base level, the competition is outside your control. You can't stop those 100 million buying your food. No, go up the value chain. And when you go up the value chain, you get export revenue. And then you also be able to deal with the baseline that is saying, the currency differential between you and the neighboring countries is making things difficult on the aggregate
we could go on and on this conversation, Prof.
That's where we need to focus on.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about on this one, but it's something that we have to sustain another time. Professor Ken Ife is a development economist as well as lead consultant, ECOWAS Commission. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Prof. As well as Dr. Muda Yusuf, who is founder, CEO, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, CPPE. He is also past DG, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Joins us here in the studio. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Ayo.